This is WVBN from the United States. Our top story is the Siege of Norfolk, the anticipated retaliation by the Morgana Cassandra for rejecting her demands for a surrender of Navy assets. Sailors and workers had worked tirelessly to prepare the naval bases and defensive fortifications for an attack, but when it came, discovered that their defensive minefields guarding the James River had vanished. The attack had begun. Norfolk began to close its heavy doors as Morgana activity was first sighted with the sunrise. Crude boats adorned with trapped survivors drifted into the harbor, and when U.S. sailors attempted to rescue them, discovered they had been booby-trapped with the missing mines. Even some of the trapped survivors were in fact Morgana thralls. With walls and vessels suffering light damage, the senior duty officer at Norfolk reluctantly ordered all guns to open fire on the remaining vessels. They were cut down before more damage could be done. The doors of Norfolk closed, trapping Maryland behind them despite her protests. She had still not been cleared for duty. Scouts soon reported a large incoming Morgana fleet, and the defenders prepared for battle. At the center of the enemy formation was a single Treason, her massive gun being towed towards Norfolk. It was clear that Cassandra was going to siege down the base, and its heavy doors could not stop her. The Navy would have to destroy her before she got in range. The fleet began to intercept them, easily dodging most of Treason's slow shells. Aircraft from land bases and USS Yorktown made attack runs on destroyers and cruisers, setting fires and blowing holes in ships. As the Morgana continued to approach, batteries from Fort Story opened up on them. The U.S. Second Fleet, waiting in the Black River, nearly sailed into disaster, but was saved when a spotter aboard USS Davis spotted the remainder of the missing mines parked at the mouth of the river, trapping the fleet. Despite this, Wyoming and Arkansas coordinated their fire with Forts Wool and Monroe, adding their firepower to the considerable defenses that continued to batter down the Morgana fleet. Aerial attacks and bombardment continued to sink Morgana, but Treason remained steadfast in her approach. Just as it seemed she would be able to unleash her firepower against Norfolk, Destroyer Division 21 joined Cruiser Division 8 as Summers, Houston, Quincy, and Nashville attacked and charged Treason, who was unable to swing her gun around before a flurry of gunfire destroyed her siege weapon and sent the ship up in a fiery explosion to her death. Morgana continued to pour into the mouth of the James River as they continued to be cut down by the American shore batteries. Destroyers and cruisers were blasted to pieces by the combined firepower of Norfolk, Forts Wool and Monroe, and the Second Fleet's battleships. The last desperate attack was against Rex, Centurion, and their American escorts near Fisherman Island. An asphyxiation had snuck up on the small group of ships, and attempted to drag USS Barry under the waves with her tentacles. Rex had enough of the Morgana, and viciously charged at the beast, blasting her with deck guns before ramming directly into her, personally impaling her with whatever sharpened object she could find, or before finishing her off by mulching the Morgana with her own propellers. Barry's crew cheered. In the aftermath, officers realized that the Morgana may have had dual objectives. Not only did they attempt to siege Norfolk, but succeeded in clogging up the dredged channel into the harbor that would allow for capital ships to traverse the waters. While lighter ships could still sail, all capital ships would have to wait until it could be cleared. The Second Fleet was thus ordered to remain outside in case it was needed to respond to threats. To the dismay of all present, analysis suggested that less than a quarter of Cassandra's fleet was destroyed in the attack. Near Panama, Rear Admiral Halsey took Enterprise along with Cruiser Division 9 and 2 destroyer divisions to hunt down the sin that had been plaguing the region once and for all. Enterprise's scouts and bombers managed to locate a pair of carriers tied together and undergoing hasty repairs, allowing the planes free rein to bomb them as much as they could. Despite this, they were unable to sink the carriers. Before a second strike could be launched, enemy Morgana service combatants located and intercepted the carrier group. Despite this, they were still outnumbered by the American ships, and the destroyers were able to catch the Morgana in a crossfire of torpedoes, while Astoria and Minneapolis raked them with shells. As Indianapolis joined them, Enterprise's second strike roared into the air, and the combined firepower of the ships and aircraft easily tore the Morgana to pieces while receiving only superficial damage in return. The damaged carriers had managed to move themselves a few miles away, but were quickly located by Enterprise, whose aircraft now had no trouble bombing the two carriers to pieces. Even so, more Morgana fighters signal it was time for Enterprise's planes to return home, and though the Morgana fighters scored 2 kills, Enterprise's fighter escorts swiftly cut them down. With extra time taken up by this, Enterprise was unable to pursue the smoke-wreathed Sin, who would live another day. USS Maryland received orders that she would soon be assigned to the command of Captain Godwin. While she did not know the man personally, he would take up command in the stead of a chosen captain. Scientist Doc, who had overseen her repairs and rehabilitation, reportedly saw her off as she prepared to enter active service once more. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who had been meeting regularly with USS Recruit, was caught in a political faux pas as Recruit fell victim to an overindulgence of alcohol during their meeting. The two women had met to discuss the potential upcoming appointment of Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox, a reported anti-Japanese proponent. Recruit's disdain for the man, who was opposed to one of the few nations able to contain the Morgana threat into the Pacific, and on good terms with the United States, was on full display as she launched into a profanity-ridden tirade against the man, before promptly keeling over the side of a railing to vomit down below. Miss Roosevelt promptly ended the meeting, and the Chief of Naval Operations had to personally apologize for Recruit's outburst, making it clear that she was not acting in an official naval capacity. Formal notices will thus be sent to all bells about codes of conduct. Sailors and agents from several nations are rumored to have been selected to travel to Brazil for unknown purposes, including from the United States. Surveillance near Alaska was ultimately unsuccessful at locating Morgana fleet assets despite attempts by local ships. Aerial naval patrols will soon be conducted out of Bermuda as new bases finish construction this week. Near Norfolk, USS Olympia steamed into the James River under her own power and was escorted by 2 tugboats to occupy Maryland's former pier. President Roosevelt signed an executive order to freeze the assets of the Kingdom of Denmark until they were no longer under the control of the German Reich. A probing attack on Puerto Rico was successfully deterred by local air forces who attacked Morgana submarines in the area. Finally, near Jamaica, local scouts reported sightings of a bright golden ship locked in a duel with a pair of Morgana capital ships. The nature of this is unknown. This has been WVBN from the United States.